Welcome to Session 7 in the UC Migration Webinar Series. I'm Rich Steves, Web Editor at TMC.
And I'm Alan Percy, Senior Director of Marketing for Audio Codes.
So we've got a very important topic in Session 7.
Exactly, call recording and logging. And this is a real important issue for businesses that have to maintain compliance with either HIPAA or for financial services organizations often have to record and manage those recordings over time. So we're going to talk about those hurdles and challenges, and we're going to talk about how call recording and compliance is implemented with Microsoft Lync.
And who are the experts that are presenting in this session?
So this particular session, we're joined by John Morrow. He's a Senior Program Manager for Microsoft. He's a 12-year veteran at Microsoft, and he's been involved with the Lync ISV partner ecosystem right from the ground up. Today he's discussing the Lync ISV ecosystem, comprised of some 1,000+ companies and delivering applications around Microsoft Lync. In addition to that, too, we're also going to be joined by Todd Simons. He's the Vice President of Business Development at Prairie Fire Software, and he's responsible for overseeing the business development initiatives for Prairie Fire Software. He's also responsible for building new channels to market Prairie Fire's portfolio of contact center, call accounting, and CRM solutions. And Todd will be describing a customer case study and architectural implementations for call recording in a contact center.
Excellent. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right.
Just want to start out with a moment to talk about just call recording in general. Now, obviously, a lot of businesses, certainly contact centers have always done quality recording for, quality management purposes and training. We've heard this so many times that it almost is invisible. But there are a lot of other businesses that have decided to leverage call recording for plenty of other reasons. And John is going to get into some detail as to why they do that. But it's become one of the issues that has held up some Lync projects. And as our partner community here, most of you probably at one time or another, if you haven't already, soon will run into a situation where the customer says, well, I love the whole idea of this UC Lync thing, but I need to understand how I'm going to be able to record and track conversations for my customers. Now, one of the questions that pops up is, why, what's the driver for businesses to do the recording? Well, it really boils down to a handful of things. And first of all, it starts with regulatory compliance. There are a number of sometimes federal, sometimes trade commission, in other cases part of healthcare, requirements to be able to meet certain requirements about documenting conversations that you've had with either employees or with customers or contractual requirements. Secondly is a sort of risk management and the idea of maintaining and protecting the information or the agreements that have been made as a business. So, for example, validation of switching from one service provider to another. Matter of fact, it's something I just went through a few days ago. You forgot about that third-party verification / recording process is a good example. Happens often with conversations with healthcare providers as you're making relatively large decisions about healthcare service and also prescriptions, et cetera. And the last is this technology enablement. And this is, we now have certainly the technology and storage to be able to record these kinds of conversations and sort through them. But this has changed. The infrastructure within our communications systems has changed, and we're trying to put all these conversations that we make and decisions and agreements that are made to archive them for further retrieval if necessary. So, we used to do this in the good old days, the TDM world. We used to have, a PBX in the center, and we were able to buy a call recorder. And really, what happened when that call recorder did is it tapped in either on what's called the trunk side of that PBX, or it tapped in on what's called the station side of the PBX. And this was done through some technology that a business unit with an audio codes had really perfected using tap technology, and we call that, the tapping technology is sort of board level, either sits on the TDM or sits on the either digital or analog phone lines. And this SmartWorks technology from Audio Codes has really been very effective in a lot of the industry, but this doesn't necessarily work in an all-IP environment. And we're going to talk about the differences in the architectures today. And so with that, what I'm going to do, John, is I'm going to turn it over to you. So you can take control and walk us through recording for the enterprise with Microsoft LAC.
Great. Thanks, Alan. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this today. It's always a fun discussion. I've been involved with it for a number of years now, and just as a small introduction on another part, my first career was managing contact centers, extremely large contact centers, and so I have that background of why this stuff is needed. I went through a lot of the pain of before the recording was something that was affordable for most companies. So just one quick thing, is any questions come up or anything, I just want to flash up the slide about feedback. We love feedback as Microsoft. So just when you get a chance, take a look at this yourself, but I won't spend any time on it. So I want to walk through life before recording, what that was like, the problems with it. Recording in the yesteryear, Alan talked about a little bit of that, but I think one of the most important things I'll just step on right now about that is that the TDM world and the VoIP world, as most of us in IT, are really definitely understand now that they're two very different things. And the ease of recording in the TDM world is a bane to the efficiencies that you get out of VoIP. And so the VoIP world brings a whole lot of challenges when we do recording, and we'll go through some of those. Then we'll talk about recording today. What are the new things that can be recorded? What are the things that you can really start to take recording as a feature and really start to take advantage of it across the enterprise? We'll go through some of the recording methodologies that most of the companies use today, and some of the pros and cons of those, the best practices, and a little bit about qualified applications and what that means to the link world. So life before recording, you know, it was an interesting space. It was a lot of he said, she said, and again, from my experiences in the contact center, I juggled my brain and it just pulled up a few of these that these things are just emblazoned in my memory. You know, things like, that is not what I told him. Well, gosh, I wish I had a recording of that. I hung up on her because that lady yelled at me. And if you go through these, and if any of you have been involved in contact centers and call centers in the past, some of these probably ring true to you. You know, there's one in here that says, I now remember you told me on the call to go ahead and order the product. How can I fix this? Not necessarily the contact center, but thinking a little bit out of the box, more of a sales. And we'll talk about recording and some other aspects of the enterprise as we go forward. But then this other one I love, the human recorder. Anyone who worked in contact centers back then recalls the human recorder. It's literally a person who sat and monitored calls and wrote down on a check, you know, all the check boxes going through. Did this person do what they said they're going to do? How was their tone? Were they friendly? You know, yada, yada, yada. And those would get filed away someplace. And some of that is still done, you know, for the right purposes, but at least it's not on paper anymore. We've definitely grown up and become more modern. So we think about recording today and some of the challenges. I think that if you look at this, there are many challenges in recording today. And one of the biggest things with a modern voice over IP system is there isn't that place that you can just go to say, oh, I want to record this call. Let me go grab the audio from the place I get the audio from. We have to deal with things like peer-to-peer. We have to deal with folks outside the firewall. Are they on a VPN? You know, what are the purposes that I want to do recording for? Is it really that I was trying to improve the quality of the services that I'm giving out to our customers? Is it about that compliance piece? There are things we just must do on every single call. You know, I call my financial services broker. I hear it all the time. They're recording every piece of that conversation. And Alan, you know, mentioned this as well. I don't think there's any company I call anymore that doesn't tell me that I am being recorded for some purpose. Ethical walls is a big one. In some situations, calls need to be recorded because people within the enterprise shouldn't be talking to each other. And it can be, for instance, in financial services, they really have to think about that. Can a foreign exchange trader, should they really be talking to this other person? And being able to pick those up, maybe it's stopping the call before it ever happens, but the other side is, why are they talking to each other? Let's make sure we record those types of calls. Even meetings. You know, not that every meeting has to be recorded, but there's reasons that we want to record certain types of meetings, or maybe if certain participants are in there. And maybe it's always by default that certain meetings that happen certain places, or have certain numbers of people in them, always get recorded. If nothing else, maybe it's for the content creation piece, which I mentioned in here. The recording, having the recording feature as a benefit for things like content creation, it's a really big thing that's starting to grow in the enterprise. And we start thinking about some of the other uses of recording across the enterprise, or we could really get value out of them. Things like when somebody's doing consulting services, and they're on these sometimes long calls, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do for this particular company. Being able to record those so they can go back to them and kind of weed through without taking the time during these calls to take notes. Or even if you think about it, so many of us are mobile today. And I take a lot of phone calls as I'm driving into work or driving home from work. And being able to have those calls recorded for me, especially if it's me meeting with another company and there's 3-4 people there, man, I don't have time to take notes. It's not a good thing that I take notes when I'm driving. Wouldn't it be nice if the system, I could just set it, hey, anytime I'm doing calls between my kind of non-work hours, record those for me, because I really need to go back to them and figure out if I've agreed to do anything that they're dependent on me for. So you think things like that and you go, oh, wow, that could really help in the sales world. Certainly in the legal and loss prevention world, absolutely. Legal is certainly a big one if we just think about it from an industry perspective on how the barristers and lawyers can take advantage of the calls to their clients automatically being recorded as well, or certain clients should always be recorded, maybe for reasons we won't talk about here. And then in the contact center, going back to that one, the notion of the casual agent. It's something that is just now kind of starting to really take root. But folks that really aren't necessarily employees of the company, they take calls from many different companies, or they take calls, they're in the enterprise, and they take calls at times only when their expertise may be needed, or when the contact center for enterprise is just getting really, really busy and they don't want to drop down the service levels, then they start bleeding those calls out into the enterprise and being able to hit those as well. Whereas that employee who's not, just a contact center agent, maybe you want to record them, but only when the call is coming from the contact center, as an example. So we think about, again, just the feature of recording and start thinking about the applicability of it across your enterprise. There's so many opportunities where it's a benefit, and there's certainly so many places where it's just a must-have feature. So with Link, again, being a modern voice over IP software-based system, recording can be tricky. There's not just a place that you can go to get that audio. So as we break down kind of the methodologies people have used, there's 3 basic ones. There's the client side. I'll go into more depth on each one of these. Each one of them has their benefits, by the way. Some maybe more than others in some situations, but there are customers out there that kind of use combinations, or any one of these or combinations thereof. So you have the client side, the passive network, and the active. And active is certainly one of those that's really starting to come to the forefront, and a lot of companies are really starting to think about active, whether it's Link or not, but how they can participate in providing active recording. So taking a look at client-side recording, and this picture that you see there is somewhat repeated over the next 3 slides, so I just want to talk about it for a second. And as we look at this area up here, when we talk about the customer, this could be outside the firewall as well, the customer coming in. It can be inside the firewall. You've got a enterprise employee that's calling into a help desk, let's say, and it can be on a Link software, just right on a soft client, just sitting right on the PC, or it can be from an IP phone. So regardless, either one of those. Signaling, in case you don't know, the signaling to set up these calls always goes through Link, but then the media is going to flow between the endpoints in most all cases except for conferencing. So in that case, in the side of client-side recording, there's always an application that has to sit here on the Link client itself that's going to be recorded. And that's for a number of reasons, but primarily because it is client-side, you have to have an application that's going to do that recording. But that application also has to be able to do other things, such as the decryption of any native codecs that are being used, and also the security decryption of any signaling that might happen to go up to the link server in the middle of the call, so you can tell what's about ready to happen to that call and should I do anything with it. Is something about the audio going to change? And then, of course, there's always an application that's a partner-specific application that's sitting on the network someplace, because those calls have to get from the client, either through streaming back up to the partner server application, to be able to hold on to those and serve them up later when somebody wants to replay them, or anything else they're going to do to process those calls. But those are the general two components. Now, as a side note, Link does have built-in client-side recording. Three things about it, really, is that one, it's on demand only. Two, it can't be accessed via API, so you just can't use that and say, oh, I want to record this call right now. And the third one is that you have to be in a conference for that call to be recorded. So it tends not to get used, certainly in the more contact center type environment or anything that has to be for compliance purposes or legal purposes. That gives you a little picture of the components involved with client side. Now, one important aspect here is you can probably figure out, if you're doing client-side recording and it requires a client, an application on the client, you always have to touch every one of those clients. So that can be difficult, certainly overcome. We do it in software all the time, but it's definitely something to think about. Then we move on to passive network recording. This is a pretty well understood methodology of recording, but it's also not the easiest to make happen. Most of the network equipment that's going to be tapped for this, most of it follows the standards, port spanning, mirroring, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty well understood that across all that type of equipment, you can do this, okay? Now, if we look at the components of where a partner's application is going to live in a scenario like passive recording, there's always this link component. And because, again, the signaling is going through Link to initially set up the peer-to-peer media, the application, the partner application, has to be aware that there's a call that's going to be set up and say, do I need to record this one? And at that point, the partner application can effectively interfere with this, get the data it needs to understand where the audio is going to flow, and where they have to tap in on the network to get the extra stream of audio, where they can then take that and record it. And pretty well understood. Some challenges with it, most definitely, is Link can do a lot of different things in the middle of a call, depending on if the call is going to get transferred, moved to a conference, if the folks are inside or outside the firewall, if both are outside the firewall. And the partner application has to be very much aware of that and react accordingly. There's also the point about the native codec decryption. So Link by default will try to use the real-time audio codec, and that's because on unmanaged networks or maybe even core networks, it can adjust to provide the highest level of quality possible for the end users. So they have to deal with the codec decryption as well as security decryption, and that's pretty much constant among the client side and the passive network recording. Again, very well understood, and AudioCode is a fantastic solution around passive network recording. Then we move on to the active recording, which at times you may also hear this referred to as just native Link, because it uses the native Link APIs and the component on our front-end servers called the AV MCU or the audio-visual MCU to serve as that media server. And there's some certain benefits to this, absolutely, is because it's using this UCMA, a trusted UCMA application. That UCMA application, that stands for Unified Communications Managed API. It's our server-side set of APIs. Well, that knows about the codecs. It's a full stack. It can do all the decryption it needs to. There's no trickery involved because it's fully aware of what Link is and how it works. It literally is like a client endpoint that runs on the server. So there's some, from a development perspective, it certainly gets simpler. From the complication side of things, Can it be a little more complicated? Well, it's not as well understood, because what's happening is you look at a conference or you look at a call and say, do I need to record this? And can in turn say, I'm going to put that into a conference with this trusted application. The trusted application can show up in the roster for users or not show up in the roster. It's trusted, so therefore it doesn't have to show up. It has access to perform things within that conference. And it's a very nice way to do recording when you get to the point where you're doing a lot of recording. You're deciding, wow, what are we going to do here? We're running out of resources. Well, the nice thing is you just scale the servers if you need to, and they scale very well. This isn't about the old world of ports. Like, oh, I need twice as many ports. Well, that's going to cost you X thousands and thousands of dollars, and then maintenance on those every month. This is really just about an inexpensive server that I put in and allows me to continue to scale that out. But some of the components are generally the same as well, as the partner application also has to know what's going on, so they know if that call needs to be recorded, whether it needs to go to a conference so that their application can join and record the call. But it's called active for the main purpose is that the partner application is actively involved in the media stream of that call. So some best practices. Some of these may be obvious to you, but I want to talk through some of them and possibly provide you a little more depth about them. So this first one is supporting native and negotiated codecs. That's a very important thing. So when we talk about the RTA, we don't do the RTA codec for the fun of it. It was done for the specific reasons I mentioned before, which is around poor or unmanaged networks, or even really well-managed networks, to make sure that the user has the absolute best audio quality during their session. And it's important that an audio recording solution continues to allow those endpoints to use the codec that was negotiated. It was negotiated for a reason, and if that's what two endpoints said is the best way for us to have a good experience, they need to be able to support that in the recording of it, in the decryption, so they can put it into other formats for other applications to take advantage of, whether it be voice analytics or whatever it might be. The next is maintaining integrity of customer deployments. So one side of that is certainly something like the codecs. The other is certainly around security. Link by default is secure end to end. And I've seen some solutions out there where folks said, oh, well, we thought it would be easier if we just, don't have the encryption. Well, that's not a good thing. The customer has gone in saying, wow, I have a fully encrypted voice deployment from end to end. You want to leave all calls the way the customer intended them to be. It was deployed link. So you don't want to mess with that. The next is covering all the call scenarios. And I pull out one big one here, which is peer-to-peer outside the firewall without VPN. So link is peer-to-peer. It gets set up, servers get out of the way, let the two endpoints deal with the media, just peer-to-peer. So what happens in a situation where you have one person who's out traveling and he's in a hotel? He doesn't need a VPN. With Link, it just goes right through the firewalls. His presence shows up. If somebody was to call their office, their computer rings, they just take the call. No VPN required. So you've got one person there, but heck, the person that's calling them from that same company is also sitting in another hotel someplace. And you go, oh, I have to record these. Well, in the scenario of the passive, with audio codes, you absolutely can, as well as on the active. And companies like Audio Codes have built in the functionality to understand where those are coming from and know exactly what to do to be able to record that. But you don't want to miss any of the opportunities to record when the customer believes that they're recording everything it has to be. You don't want to be the one that leaves any black holes and leaves them open to any issues with compliance or legal or anything like that. Then the limiting the bandwidth usage. This is when you stop to think about how the recording application is going to, live side by side with that link infrastructure. Are we unnecessarily, taking bandwidth? If it's a peer-to-peer call, are we unnecessarily now taking a whole other stream and piping it someplace? Are we taking it across a WAN when we don't need to be doing that? Are we eating up more bandwidth because we decided that, oh, that's not the best codec? We're going to force the two clients to use this codec instead. Those are things you don't want to do. Again, customers buy Link because of the way everything is managed by that software. You want to make sure that their investments in ROI can continue to be realized no matter whether the call is being recorded or not. And this next one is about finding that right percentage of calls to record, especially on the QA and compliance perspective. There are some industries where you just have to record everything. It's just what you do. That's not necessarily an extreme either. Financial services, most definitely that one. But it's really helping the customer understand what percentage needs to be recorded to give them the maximum understanding of what's happening in their environment with their employees and what their customers are getting as far as quality is concerned. If it's not necessary to record everything 100% of the time, there's no reason to do it. Most recordings will never go back and have anything done with them. That's just reality. So help the customer come to that decision on what is that percentage. And now lastly is, if you're going to invest in recording, think about the benefits across your enterprise. Folks on mobile phones, other departments. It's not necessarily for, oh, I'm going to record your call because I want to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's really the benefit the employee can get out of it, the fact that their call is being recorded, they can always refer back to it. Or when I think about the content creation piece, the content creation piece is a really critical part going forward because so many enterprises create content all the time, whether it be a PowerPoint, whether it's in a meeting and they're presenting, whether they're talking about something, explaining something to one of their a group of coworkers to make them understand exactly what they need to do to make this whatever product or process it is successful. There's opportunities there where the recording system can help the employees out and the enterprise by capturing all of this information for reuse at a later time and put up into content management systems. So definitely just take a look across the enterprise. Someone invest, get the most out of the investment. And lastly, as we talk through all these pieces, AudioCodes was a fantastic partner of ours as we went to develop our Link ISV application qualification program. And I can't thank them enough for being a part of that whole process. Here is a link where you can go find out about more qualified applications that work on Link. Not necessarily recording, but there's lots of other things out there. And of course, a subset of the 1,000 solutions that are out there today that are built on the Link platform. So with that, Alan, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, John. That's a great background, a great insight into some of the challenges with recording in Link. So next, we're going to turn it over to Todd, and Todd's going to share with us a case study that Prairie Fire has published. And it's a great story about a company moving to the contact center, but also features call recording logging technology from AudioCodes. So Todd, take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. So just a quick slide about who we are. We're Prairie Fire Software, and unlike AudioCodes and Microsoft, we're not exactly a household name. We're a private company of about 120 employees. We've been building call centers for about 14 years. We're actually an OEM manufacturer of contact center solutions for PBX manufacturers. So we've accumulated probably closer to 8,000 customers in 70 countries worldwide. We've been building call centers based on Microsoft technologies for several years. And so it's our newest solution we've had over the last couple of years is the Prairie Fire Contact Center for Microsoft Link. So one of the customers that has chosen this solution, we'll talk about in the case study today, that's the Weiss Group. They're a financial services firm. They publish a financial newsletter called Money and Markets, reaches over a subscription rate of 450,000 readers. The contact center that they have there primarily handles inbound calls from their subscribers who want to reset passwords, that sort of thing. It's a very high-touch contact center where they want to provide very high level of service because these are typically fairly high net worth individuals that they're talking to. And they also handle some very sensitive information in terms of financial advice and that sort of thing. So naturally, as John had talked about in his presentation, one of the requirements for financial services is obviously call recording as well in the contact center. Some of the compelling reasons that Weiss went out looking for a new solution is that they were leasing a traditional PBX under a managed services contract, and that contract was set to expire. And under that, they were paying actually about $15,000 a month for their managed solutions contract. It included their PBX. And really, the PBX vendor that they had been dealing with, the traditional TDM legacy PBX vendor, really had an uncertain technology roadmap in terms of where they were going with their solution. Really, an inability to cost effectively integrate the telephone system with any back office applications and other business processes. The cost of doing that, of any kind of CTI with a legacy TDM PBX, can be rather cost prohibitive. And they really they had a legacy Linux-based instant messaging system, and they really wanted to look at some more modern technology that could integrate instant messaging and presence capability for their call center agents and their ability to leverage presence in the rest of the enterprise when they wanted to, contact a subject matter expert, for financial advice, that sort of thing, and also use such features as group chat. So they went out, they thought the time is right for us to evaluate what other solutions are out there in the market. So one of the first things they looked for, or one of the first solutions they looked at, was Office Communication Server. And they actually initially deployed that in conjunction with their traditional TDM PBX, and found it was really successful in terms of streamlining business processes, allowing them to effectively communicate with one another, etc. And they really were surprised to find out that Office Communication Server had voice capability that would actually be potentially a PBX replacement. So once Microsoft released the Link product, I think the fix was in, as far as the Weiss executive were concerned, that they really thought, Link can quite effectively replace the PBX for all of our regular office workers. The only sort of missing was their call center, and also the ability to do call recording, et cetera, because they didn't have a legacy, again, older call recording solution on their traditional PBX. So they evaluated various Link contact center solutions, and eventually did a proof of concept with ourselves. And really, we were helping them to port their existing contact center functionality over to the Link platform. They also did an evaluation of the various call recording solutions out there for Link, and again decided on audio codes, primarily because, as John talked about in his presentation, audio codes has a very nicely integrated solution into Link that really doesn't put a lot of overhead on the Link front end. In terms of some call recording solutions actually create conferences for every call, and that's how they record, whereas audio codes has done a lot more complete integration into the actual Link system. So, really, what it came down to, as far as their head of IT, James Santillo, said, really, the reason that we chose, Prairie Fire and really audio codes is because it did not really interfere with Link, and the call routing engine that we have with our solution is really an end-to-end Link solution that is built on top of the Link call control at the server end and presents the call to the agent through the Link client on the desktop. All we really add is the ACD and management applications that you don't have with Link, and really make it so that it's quite a nicely bundled solution that is really, as I mentioned, end-to-end Link. It really came down to cost and architecture. And so how it was deployed is, and as in this diagram here, they really deployed it as their data center is actually in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where their Link front ends are, as well as our applications, which typically run on a single server. And again, as I mentioned, we really don't take the call off the Link front end. When a phone call comes into Link, how we treat it is your queues for your contact center, just SIP addresses on that Link front end. And then we're integrated to Link via UCMA, as John talked about their API called UCMA, and SIP. And we really just apply the routing logic to the call. Once it's on the Link front end, we play the in-queue messaging, et cetera, expected wait time messages, that sort of thing. and the music. And when we find a longest idle agent or whatever the business rules are, we fire the call off to the agent via their link client in conjunction with their link compliant headset, handset, IP phone, etc. And as I mentioned, they implemented also the audio codes SmartCap in their particular application. So it made quite a nicely packaged solution for them. And again, we really don't put any overhead on that link front end as does the audio codes application, and I think was a real winner for them. On the desktop, again, we use Link on the desktop, and all we've done is add a toolbar to Link, which adds your ACD agent functionality, your ability to log in and log out of queues, put yourself in Make Busy with Reason. As you might notice here, we've actually taken and extended if you're familiar with Link and the standard Link present states, we've actually extended the present states of Link so that they're more specific and granular to a contact center. So not only can you see that I'm available, that you can see that I'm available for ACD, or if I'm Make Busy, why am I Make Busy? Again, you can put Make Busy or DND with reason codes. And really it adds that contact center functionality as well as the ability to see all of your real-time statistics, etc. From the contact center, be able to monitor in real time what's happening in your queues, happening with your agents, etc. How many calls are waiting, how many agents are in Make Busy, etc. So really, the long and the short of it, the ROI for the Weiss group was, the deployment of the Link Voice, decommissioning their old TDM PBX and cutting over to Link Voice took a couple of weeks, with the final cutover taking only a day. And instead of paying $15,000 a month, they now had a system that they owned. Their ROI was probably less than 6 months. It was probably closer to about 5 months in terms of implementing Link, the SmartCap call recording solution, etc. So they really realized a fast ROI on deploying their solution to Link. And also they saved a lot of money on their trunking costs. So they were able to get by without as many trunks by deploying Microsoft Link. And they reduced their costs there by about $4,500 a month. And they were able to, because of the efficiencies they found with using the Microsoft Link, were able to reduce their workforce by the equivalent of seven total jobs. They also had, because they had set up their solution with a cold standby system in their data center, they actually had better redundancy and resiliency with the Link solution, voice solution, than they had with a traditional TDM PBX solution. So really the lessons learned from the Weiss case study, you could download a copy of it off our website, is that although Weiss is not a very large company with a smaller contact center, they were still able to really realize an ROI by deploying Microsoft Link, for an SME type customer. It was still, the ability to get out of that legacy proprietary solution and implement unified messaging, instant messaging, and a contact center was quite effective for them, even though they were not a very large company and really an SME play, and really allowed them to be more productive and give them a sense of future proofing and their ability to integrate their back office applications, etc., into the overall communications infrastructure. As I mentioned, you can download a copy of that case study created by Ovum Research off of our website. And that's it for me. And I'll hand it back over to Alan. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Todd. Yeah, great insight into a pretty interesting story on contact center in the Link environment. And I know they're going to be increasingly more common in the partner community, so I'm sure they appreciate the content today. So we're going to spend a couple minutes here, just a few minutes talking about SmartCap and call recording technology from audio codes, and then again we'll move on and get to the survey and Q&A, see a few questions here piled up. So just a quick overview of SmartCap. I think at this point folks have pretty much figured out it's a software-based solution, server-based solution, runs on Windows 7 or Windows 2008. The typical server can support up to 300 concurrent recording sessions per server, and of course it's scalable by racking and stacking the servers in either a conventional environment or a virtualized environment. And one of the nice things about it is that we can combine not only this IP recording but also with TDM blades, for the SmartWorks blades that we manufacture to give those hybrid environments an opportunity to do recording, so that there might still be a PBX involved or legacy equipment that needs to be integrated in. That's not uncommon. Obviously, people are making their UC migration to have these hybrid environments. So just a quick peek at the user interface, based on some use that I've done with it and some demos I've gone through with it. It's very straightforward. It's web-based user interface for the recording management, configuration, etc. This particular screen shows recording log and also allows for real-time listening of calls, and that's not an uncommon application in the contact center space where a supervisor might want to listen into a call. You can see down on the bottom right, here's a log of calls that have been made. One of them is opened with more detail, and basically to listen to that recording, it's as simple as clicking a checkbox and then going up and hitting the media player to be able to listen to that particular call. And of course, it's fully managed either through the user interface or some of the other more sophisticated management systems. Well, the question that always pops up is, so how does it work? How does how does AudioCode's SmartCap integrate into the link environment? Well, I plucked out a couple of architectural diagrams that I wanted to share with you folks so you can see the difference in this environment or this architecture versus some of the other solutions that might be rattling around in the market. In this one particular scenario, there's an outside caller that might be on a mobile phone or might be on a landline that's being communicated to through a link server out to agents. And one of the unique things about this particular solution is it's an all IP environment, and the calls need to be recorded. So where does that happen, and how does that happen? And that's done through one of the key pieces of our architecture, is this SmartCap Edge plugin. And this is a piece of software that's installed on the Edge server that provides connectivity not only for the call state, but also forwarding the media. And that combined with a front-end plugin sends over the call state and call traffic information to the SmartCap. And this provides that ability to allow customers to be able to maintain their security, maintain the voice coders that they've selected, and not dictate to them, that, well, I know you used to use security, but you're going to have to turn it off to do recording, or gee whiz, I'm sorry that you can't record this particular type of call. So we're trying to avoid that. And of course, we're able to accomplish that with this particular architecture. And the next diagram here is a perfect example. And this would be, a remote mobile-to-mobile conversation, where normally what would happen if it wasn't a targeted to be recorded call, what would happen is the call session or management would happen through the Edge proxy server and into the link environment, but the media would actually go directly phone to phone over the internet. But because of the logic, the SmartCap application says, hey, I want to record that call, it's able to then instruct the link environment to, instead of letting the media go direct end to end, it's able to move the media into the Edge proxy server and grab a copy of the media, keeping it completely encrypted and transparent to the user. And this, by the way, the transparency is something that we really hadn't talked about very much at this point, but it's very important, and especially in the contact center space and financial services, that the users don't know when they're being recorded. This is a critical aspect of the fear and uncertainty of recording, is that the users can't see a little red dot or notice some change of behavior, or maybe a little additional latency in their call. And those are all tip-offs that this call is being recorded and the other ones aren't. And if a user knows they're being recorded, their behavior certainly changes, or vice versa if they know they're not being recorded. So it's an important piece of it. So just architecturally wanted to point that out, very important. Also, too, I wanted to point out some of the big feature differences or feature enhancements with adding the SmartCap recorder. The basic recording client-to-client. Microsoft Link certainly covers that. John mentioned it earlier in the presentation just with client recording, but there's a number of facets here that we're able to add with this software application. The client and the client to PSTN, the remote and federated users, the centralized management and storage of all the calls, the ability to work in an encrypted and compressed environment, working with the current set of voice coders and not forcing different voice coders to be used, and also the security, quality management, and to be able to support HTTP live streaming for the listening of calls. All very important, valuable assets that the SmartCap brings to the solution. So just a quick summary on SmartCap. One of the key things that's fully certified. You heard John mention it earlier. Here's the same link again. We were the first qualified recording solution as part of the ISV certification program. Very proud of that, and glad to be able to make it through that important hurdle, which obviously brings big value to our partners. The fact that it's very cost effective. We're not asking for significant network replacement like port mirroring ports and things like that on network switches. And of course, we're not going to say, well, sorry, that RTA is not going to cut it. We're going to need you to move over to G711, which then causes a massive amount of additional traffic on the network or reduces voice quality. We're going to let those calls stay in the compressed and also in the high quality codec, and that reduces costs of network upgrades, et cetera, plus all the really capable features that we've mentioned earlier. And last, I want to point out, there's a specific URL to go right to the SmartCap product family here at audioclips.com/product-family/SmartCap, and of course that'll be part of the follow-up email as part of today's session. So great platform, glad to have it as part of today's conversation.
A lot of really good information on a really important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. For those businesses that are in a compliance environment, call recording is critical, and as you saw, can be accomplished relatively painlessly. But yes. Yep.
So we're coming to the end of the series. What do we have for the last session?
Yeah, so the last session is going to be about bringing it all together with professional services. So we're real excited about that.
Definitely, and you should check that out.